Humans entered Texas during the Ice Age, between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. Geographically, Texas looked much like it does today, but there was a significant difference. In the Panhandle region, it was much wetter, with rivers that supported grasslands. During the age of the dinosaurs, the Wichita Mountains gradually eroded, providing a layer of soil for those grasslands. In East Texas, on the other side of the mountains, there was more rainfall which supported the piney woods, along with fertile soils that built up over the eons when the area was underwater. The Gulf Coast was wet and muggy, with fertile soils that became sandier as one nears the Gulf. Finally, the Rio Grande Valley had rocky and alkaline soils. Only through modern irrigation could the land produce citrus and cotton. During the ice ages, the polar ice caps were much larger than they are today. So much water was trapped in them that the coastline of Texas was 350 feet lower than in its modern counterpart. Glaciers covered much of North America, pushing animals south towards the Texas plains. These included woolly mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed tigers, and giant bison. Around this time, North and South America began to be populated with people entering Texas by following the herds that took advantage of the area's grasslands. The oldest skeletal remains found in the state were discovered in 1983 when archaeologists unearthed the remains of a woman near the town of Leander. Carbon dating suggests that the bones date back to about 10,000 to 13,000 years ago. Her location gave her the name the Neanderthal Lady, and her remains are among the most complete and oldest in Texas. These early arrivals stayed on the plains because everything they needed could be found there. Life was tough back then. Their main food sources were massive, about 25 to 50% bigger than what we have today. They used rudimentary weapons like spears and created stampedes to drive animals over cliffs. The end of the ice ages made life more difficult as the giant animals like the bison began dying off due to their inability to adapt to warmer temperatures. To make matters worse, drought gripped the area for the next 4,000 years. People began to move out of the plains in search of food. Some went east into the piney woods, others to the Gulf Coast, but most abandoned the plains. With the death of the megafauna of the Ice Age, people turned to smaller game like deer and rabbit and fish the area's rivers. They eventually turned to using the bow and arrow. It is difficult to estimate when it emerged in Texas, but it is clear that it was developed after the abandonment of the plains. Agriculture made its first appearance around 600. The lands of Texas's early Indians helped to find much of their identity. The location of an Indian tribe greatly determined its well-being in clout prior to the arrival of Europeans in the 16th century. At the top of the Indian power structure in Texas were the Caddo. They lived in the East Piney Woods, a fertile area where they could grow their own food. They were part of a larger society that reached all the way to the Mississippi. Their fertile soils easily accommodated corn, and they traded their surplus with other peoples. They were settled, organized, and materially better off than any other Texas tribe. In southeast Texas, near Houston, lived the Atakapas. They too had fertile soils, but the area was swampy and filled with mosquitoes. They were not as organized or materially well off as the Caddo, ranking just below them. Along the coast lived the Karankawa. They weren't organized like the Caddo. Instead, they were more of a group sharing a language. They survived on fish and alligators, using alligator grease to keep mosquitoes away. In South Texas lived the Coahuiltecans. This area was hot, dry, and sandy, making agriculture extremely difficult. They were not a tribe as much as a combination of groups that lived in the area. They ranked near the bottom of the power structure and struggled to survive. The Apache lived on the Great Plains, hunting the bison herds that dominated the area. They did so on foot, as the horse did not exist in the Americas before the Spanish arrival. Without it, the Apache would not have assumed the fearsome reputation that history remembers. The horse transformed them into a much more powerful people. In northern Texas were the Wichita, who lived at the crossroads of the plains, East Texas, Oklahoma, and the Panhandle. Their location on the fringes of the plains enabled them to live lives similar to the Caddo. They could grow their own food, had permanent villages, and were close enough to the migrating bison to venture out into the plains to hunt them. They took advantage of the trade routes that existed within their homelands. One group that had not yet made an entrance was the Comanche. Documentary evidence of their presence will not exist until about 1743. They were part of the Shoshone and made their way south from Colorado. By 1500, approximately 12 million Indians were living in North America. South of the Rio Grande, however, it was a different story. In Mexico, scholars estimate there were as many as 35 million people living in the area. In South America, that number goes up to 60 million. Before we move on to the arrival of the Spanish, we need to talk about the Aztecs. Around 1300, the collapse of the Maya allowed for a power vacuum in central Mexico. This vacuum was filled by the Aztecs. They are more popularly known as an empire, but they were more like the city-states of ancient Greece, sharing a common language and culture. The most important of these city-states was Tenochtitlan, located in present-day Mexico City. They conquered their neighbors and exacted tribute from them, acquiring food and sacrificial victims. These people made it clear they would never be assimilated into Aztec society. Thus, by the time the Spanish arrived, the Aztecs were surrounded by those who hated them. That hatred would contribute to the Aztecs' eventual downfall.